Okay, class, today we're going to take section 2 of chapter 9, which is the making of an empire, and we'll be covering pages 418 to 428. Muslim armies spread rapidly throughout the Arabian Peninsula, conquering Spain and invading France in the west and reaching the Indus River in the east. Arabs invaded and conquered wealthy Egypt. The Persian Sassanid Empire fell quickly, and the Arabs picked off much of the Byzantine territory. So you see from the map in the green how the empire spread from 700 to 850. You see that knowing that the Islamic territory started in 622 and how much territory they've gained, because just starting in Little Medina and then spreading all the way through eastward to Harkland and then westward into Spain. Also, the Arab forces spread through war and conquest. A lot of battles that took place, they were kind of an aggressive group, and with that they spread through certain battles. One of the battles being in 751, the Islamic forces defeated the Chinese in Central Asia at the Battle of Talis. This allowed the Turkic people to become widespread Islamic culture and check the westward spread of China. Now you see on the map the spread of Islam throughout the certain time periods. 622 to 632 is shown in the deep purple, and then from 632 to 656 probably their biggest gain at that time, during that time period, and 656 to 750 in the darker blue as it continues to spread both eastward and westward, and from 750 to 900 in the lighter blue. You see that it takes up part of Europe, it takes northern Africa, and Islam is a growing culture, a growing religion that spread throughout most of Eurasia. While the Muslims were eager to spread their faith, there were also very worldly economic interests in the building of the empire. Rich trade routes and productive farmlands increased the wealth and new expanding empire. So a lot of the motives for this war and conquest was economic. And understand, not only were they spreading the religion, but they were gaining riches throughout this whole time. If conversion was encouraged, the empire respected Jews, Christians, and Zoroastrians as fellow people of the book. These groups were granted a special status of dhimmi and were required to pay a tax, which was called the jizya, in lieu of military service, although many dhimmi did serve in the military. This tolerance allowed these faiths to continue to be practiced. While there were obviously many people drawn to the Islam for spiritual or psychological reasons, there were also a number that went through a social conversion, meaning that they shifted from one community to another. Many early converts came from the ranks of the prisoners of war or slaves who had been coerced. There were also economic reasons for converting, such as avoiding the jizya, or the connections merchants could make by being part of the Islamic community. While in North Africa and much of Mesopotamia, people converted and adopted to the Arabic language and culture. Areas east of the Tigris and Euphrates did not. The Persians, Turks, and people of the Indus River Valley held on to their traditional language, even though they were Islamicized. Persia, as centuries-old empire and civilization, not only held on to its traditions, but many of them spread to the wider Muslim world. Persian architecture, administration, and art influenced the culture of the eastern reaches of Islam. After the death of the Prophet disputes arose over who should lead the community. The first leaders were all companions of the prophet. The first caliph had to put down political revolts, and new prophets of the third and fourth caliphs were assassinated. Thus, within decades of Muhammad's death, civil war threatened to destroy the unity that he built. So understand, you start to have different variations, or what we call sects, S-E-C-T-S, of Islam. And that even lasts through the day. So you have today what we call the Sunni Muslims and the Shia Muslims. Initially a political dispute over who should rule the Ummah, the Sunni Shia controversy still divides the Islamic world. Shia argue that the leader should come from the direct descendant of Muhammad, while the Sunnis hold that a learned member of the community should lead. As there was much persecution of the Shia and several of their leaders were killed, they developed an ideology of an oppressed minority and came to hold the mystical ideas such as the belief that an assassinated leader had gone into hiding and will return to save the community someday. Such Messianic beliefs and other rituals developed into a distinct Shia culture. So from this slide, we will see the differences between the Sunnis and the Shiites. First of all, the Sunnis believe that the caliph is a rightful political and military leader of Islam. They also believe the caliph should be chosen from the Islamic community. Where the Shiites or the Shia believe that the leader of the Islamic community should be a blood descendant or relative of Muhammad. The Sunnis believe the caliph can be any devout Muslim. And they believe that the religious authority comes from the larger Islamic community, particularly the Ummah, which is the religious scholars. Religious authority on the Shiite side, religious authority comes from prayer leaders called imams. And an imam is only ones that can correctly interpret the divine revelations of Islamic law. As the Arab Empire grew, you see the caliphs were transformed from modest Arab chiefs to absolute, all-powerful monarchs. They held elaborate court rituals. They believed in a complex bureaucracy and a standing army. They also believed in centralized systems of taxation and money. So we'll see two of the major ruling dynasties that are going to come during this time period, one being the Umayyad dynasty and the second, the Abbasid dynasty. The Umayyads, this dynasty with its capital, which was not in Medina, but in the old Roman and Byzantine city of Damascus, provided unity, but soon faced a series of revolts. So you see from the slide that the empire's capital was moved from Medina to Damascus, and the ruling class was made up of the Arab military aristocracy. Reasons for the Umayyad dynasty's demise: they were overthrown because a lot of non-Arabs resented their status as second-class citizens. The Shiite Muslims believed that the Umayyad caliphs were illegitimate. And then also, many Arabs protested the luxurious living of their rulers. A lot of money was being spent. They didn't want all of these rulers to have these lavish lifestyles. So there was a lot of protest as far as that was concerned. Then you have the Abbasid dynasty. The Abbasids, with their capital in ancient Mesopotamian city of Baghdad, overthrew the Umayyads, but soon faced many revolts themselves before finally falling to the Mongols in the year 1258. A number of smaller states run by sultans broke away from Baghdad's central authority after the mid-9th century. In deciding how Muslims should live, there was a movement to use the Sharia law to structure all aspects of the society. Thus, a number of schools developed to interpret and administer the law. There's a central question as far as the empire is concerned. What does it actually mean to be a Muslim? First, there was strict adherence to the Sharia, which was the Islamic religious and civil law. And the Sharia, we understand, was based on the Quran. It was the life and teachings of Muhammad. It included deductive reasoning and the consensus of the ulama, which were the Muslim scholars. The Sharia addressed virtually every aspect of life. For example, it believed that guidance for prayer and ritual cleansing. There was a certain way you treated the slaves. You had rules for political life and rules for marriage, divorce, and inheritance. Also, there were rules for business and commercial practices. Now we'll talk a little bit about the Sufis. These were mystics who did not believe that it was necessary to follow the letter of the law. Rather, through meditation or ritual, one could have a close spiritual contact with the divine. Sufis often describe their relationship with the divine as a form of intoxication or overwhelming love. Sufis believed many ulama had been corrupt in their association with worldly and corrupt governments. They also challenged the religious authority of these ulama and charted their own course to Allah. So the Sufis were a little bit different. Understand their differences between the ulama and what the Sufis were. Now we'll talk a little about women and their role as far as Islam was concerned and how they differed from men. During the time of the revelations, Muhammad created rules that protected women and gave them some control over their property and rights to divorce. The famous passage that allowed Muslim men to have up to 4 wives also states that they must also be cared for equally. Spiritually, women who were devout and had good morals would receive Allah's blessing just as men would. The revelations contain some strict restrictions. Some of the examples that you see of the rights of men and women, the women had the rights to dowries. We talked about dowries before, was what the women brought to the marriage, and they also had some inheritances. They had control of their own property. Also, the marriage must be consensual. It was not set aside by parents, or it was not forced. And women could divorce men, especially if they weren't pleased in the bedroom. Other growing restrictions. A lot of this occurred during the Abbasid dynasty. When the Arab empires were established after the Prophet's death, there were increased restrictions on elite women. Many of these restrictions, such as veiling and sequestering, were kept with earlier pre-Islamic practices in the part of the world, and most were difficult and impractical to apply to lower class women. So lower class women didn't have servants. They had to leave the house for shopping or work. And this was not the Quran itself, but it was just the culture of the Arab Empire. Women were expected to pray at home instead of in the public mosque. The veiling and seclusion that we talked about became a standard practice. And other things that were interesting, there were separate living quarters for wealthy homes for women. And the honor killing that it talks about, you see in this slide. Women were killed by male relatives if they violated a sexual taboo. And then the last thing, talking about female genital cutting, which was the term for clitorectomy. Moving on to the hadiths. The hadiths were the traditions about the sayings or the actions of Muhammad. And this became an important source of Islamic law. And it was negative. It showed a negative view of women, seeing that them being weak, deficient, etc. A lot of the traditions were basically patriarchal. Even though Muhammad in his original sayings saying that he believed that women had equal rights of men, but the Arab social structure was that it was based mainly on patriarchy. So this is going to conclude the second part of chapter 9. Make sure that you take your notes effectively and look forward to part 3.